My name is Chike, son of Okena, from Umuokwe village. If you are hearing my voice today, you must promise me one thing. Never walk alone when the moon hides her face. Because that is when she moves, the woman who eats shadows. Yes, you may laugh, but I saw it. I lived it. I lost people I loved. And though many years have passed, the smell of that night still follows me like smoke that refuses to fade. It began on a night like no other, a night when the dogs refused to bark, when the air stood still, and when the fireflies blinked like dying eyes. That evening, my mother was roasting yam by the hearth. I was sitting outside, cleaning my father's hunting knife, waiting for supper. The moon was bright, the stars clear, everything looked calm. Then, without warning, the wind changed. It came like a sigh, soft at first, then strong enough to shake the palm trees. The fire dimmed, and my mother crossed herself with her right hand, whispering, "Chinemo." This wind smells of spirits. She was right. The air that night carried a strange scent, not like rain or dust, but something dry and cold, like burnt cloth and bitter leaves. Even the goats started to bleat restlessly, pulling at their ropes. Then, far off, the first scream came. It was from the direction of Nkem the palm wine tapper's hut. A long, deep cry that froze the whole village. People rushed out of their homes carrying lanterns. I ran with my friend Obi, who lived next door. As we ran, I saw something that made my heart pound. The moon had hidden her face behind clouds. The path was dark, though no rain fell. It was as if the night itself had swallowed the light. When we reached Nkem's compound, people were already gathered. His wife, Ngozi, was on the ground, beating her chest and crying. He was breathing. Just now. He was breathing. Nkem lay beside the fire, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. At first, people thought it was a heart attack, but when Dibia Nwokoye, the priest of our land, came forward, he knelt beside the body, held up his oil lamp, and frowned. "What is it, Dibia?" someone asked. The old man slowly lifted his hand toward the wall, and then everyone saw it. The firelight danced on every wall, but Nkem's body had no shadow. The crowd gasped. Even the wind seemed to pause. The Dibia muttered some words under his breath, shaking his cowries. "The spirit that did this walks among us," he said. "The land is no longer clean." I wanted to look away, but my eyes were fixed on Nkem's face. His skin was cold, his lips pale, but his expression, it was not peace. It was as if he died in surprise, like someone who saw something he could not understand. That night, no one slept. The elders gathered under the big udala tree to talk. My father was there, and when he came home later, I asked him what they would do. He sighed and said, "These are not things for children to know. Go to sleep, my son." But I could not sleep. Outside, the dogs were howling again, long and low, as if mourning. From the direction of the forest came a faint humming sound, like a woman singing in the distance. The song was soft and sorrowful, yet it made the hairs on my neck rise. I lay awake until dawn, eyes open, listening. By morning, the news had spread like fire through dry grass. Nkem was buried quickly, before the sun climbed too high. The Dibia warned that his body must not face the rising sun. "He has no shadow," the old man said. "If the sun touches him, his spirit will not rest." People began to whisper among themselves. Some said a witch had entered our land. Others said it was the anger of Allah, the earth goddess, for the sins of our people. But most of us were simply afraid. 2 days later, another man died. This time it was Okafor, the blacksmith. Strong man, never sick a day in his life. He was found seated beside his forge, eyes open, tools still in his hands, no wound, no blood, and again, no shadow. Now the whole village was in chaos. Children cried, women refused to go to the stream after sunset, men gathered in groups, whispering prayers. Even the cock stopped crowing in the mornings. I tried to act brave, but inside I was shaking. It felt as if something was watching us, something that lived between the light and the dark. That was when I saw her, the woman who would change everything. It was a Friday market day. The sun was high and the square was full of traders and buyers. Then suddenly all the talking and haggling stopped. People turned to look in one direction. She stood at the edge of the market, tall, dark-skinned, wearing a red wrapper tied tightly at her waist. Her hair was plaited in a single long braid that reached her back. Her eyes were sharp, her face smooth and calm. She carried a small brown calabash in her left hand tied with black thread. She walked slowly through the market, looking around like someone seeing a place for the first time. When she passed, people stepped aside quietly. Even the wind seemed to follow. For 3 days after the third death, the air in Umuokwe hung heavy, as though the sky itself refused to breathe. No one went near the forest anymore. The hunters stayed home, pretending their traps needed mending. Even the women stopped going to the stream before sunrise. They said the water looked black and deep, as if something beneath it was watching. We lived in fear, but fear, like everything, becomes familiar with time. And so by the fourth day, life began to move again. The market reopened. Men went back to their farms. The children started playing near the udala tree, though their laughter was quick and nervous. That was when she came, the woman from nowhere. It was a bright market day. The air smelled of palm oil and smoked fish. Women shouted prices, men bargained, goats bleated. Everything was loud and alive, until suddenly the noise began to fade. One by one, people turned toward the narrow path that led from the forest. She was walking toward us. At first, I thought she was like any other trader, but as she came closer, something about her made my heart tighten. She was tall, taller than most women in the village. Her skin was dark, smooth, and without blemish, and her eyes, they were the color of old wood after rain, deep and still. She wore a red wrapper tied tightly around her waist and a plain white blouse that looked almost new. Around her neck hung a small charm made of cowries and red thread. In her left hand, she carried a small brown calabash sealed with black string. It was simple, yet it felt strange, like it carried something heavier than its size could hold. She walked slowly, with the calm grace of someone who did not fear being watched. The market grew silent as she passed. Even the wind seemed to pause. "Who is she?" my mother whispered beside me. No one answered. She walked to an empty spot beside the palm oil sellers, placed her mat on the ground, and sat down. Then, quietly, she untied her basket and began to arrange her goods: small bottles of red oil, kola nuts, dried herbs. Everything looked ordinary, but her movements were too careful, too measured, like a priestess preparing for a ritual instead of a woman opening her market stall. A brave woman named Adana went to her first. "Good afternoon, Nenen. We haven't seen you before. Are you from Umuagu?" The stranger looked up slowly, her lips curling into a small smile that never reached her eyes. "My name is Amauche," she said softly. Her voice was low but clear. "I came from far away. I will stay here for some time." "Who are your people?" Adana asked again. For a moment, Amauche didn't answer. She just stared past Adana, toward the hills in the distance, then said, "My people are gone." The earth swallowed them. Adana frowned and stepped back slightly. "Ehya, sorry, oh," she murmured, and quickly left. The women began to whisper among themselves. Some said she was a widow seeking a new start. Others said she was a herbalist's apprentice who had lost her master. But one thing everyone agreed on was that her presence changed the air around her. Even her shadow seemed wrong, longer than it should be, bending slightly away from her body instead of behind her. I tried not to stare, but when she looked up and our eyes met, I felt something sharp and cold pass through me. It wasn't fear exactly, it was recognition, like I had seen her before in another life. She smiled faintly, then looked away. That night, my mother couldn't stop talking about her. "She is too quiet," she said while roasting plantain by the fire. "I don't trust a woman who smiles with her mouth, but not her eyes." My father shrugged. "Maybe she is just tired of life." The world has not been kind to women who walk alone, but even he sounded unsure. Outside, the night was still. The frogs had stopped croaking, and the crickets were silent. It was as if even the insects were holding their breath. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face. The stillness of it, the calm that was not peace, but something deeper, like sadness mixed with power. When sleep finally came, it was thin and restless. The next morning, the market was full of gossip. People said Amauche's palm oil never finished. Each day, she sold full bottles, yet the next morning, her basket was full again. She refills at night, one woman said. With what? Another asked. There is no sound from her hut. No smell of oil being boiled. Nothing. By evening, the story had grown into something darker. They said a man had seen her walking at night toward the forest, her red wrapper glowing faintly under the moon. They said she was talking softly as she walked, as though speaking to someone who wasn't there. 3 days passed like that. Rumors and whispers, fear hidden behind normal routines. Then one afternoon, while I was returning from the farm with Obi, we saw her again. She was standing by the stream, her calabash in her hands, looking down into... The days that followed Amauche's disappearance were strangely quiet. The kind of quiet that feels wrong, too heavy, too thick, like the world was holding its breath. People tried to convince themselves that it was over, that maybe she had left our village forever, taking the evil with her. The markets opened again, children returned to play by the stream, and laughter began to rise once more, thin, uncertain laughter that broke too quickly. But beneath it all, fear still sat in every heart. You could feel it in the way people walked faster at dusk, or how they shut their doors before the sun completely vanished. No one lingered outside anymore. Even the night seemed to listen. The first whisper came a week later. It started with Ijoma, a young woman newly married. She woke up one morning screaming. Her husband said she had been turning in her sleep, muttering words that made no sense. When they asked what she saw, she began to cry. She was standing at the foot of my bed, Ijoma said, her voice shaking. The woman in red. She called my name. She said she had come for my shadow. Everyone went silent. The air itself seemed to pause. Someone tried to calm her, saying it was only a dream. But 3 nights later, Ijoma was dead. There were no wounds, no marks, just her body, cold, eyes open, and again, no shadow. From that day, sleep became a curse. People began to fear the night more than death itself. Children cried at sunset, begging not to be left alone. Mothers prayed with bitter cola in their mouths. Men slept with charms tied around their wrists. And me, I began to dream too. The first time it happened, I saw myself standing in the middle of the village square. The moon was red and round like blood, and the huts looked strange, longer, wider, leaning in as if they were watching me. Then I heard footsteps behind me, slow, steady, almost gentle. I turned, and there she was, Amauche. She was wearing the same red wrapper, her hair falling down her back like black rope. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her smile was neither cruel nor kind. It was simply empty. Chike, she said softly. Her voice was the sound of dry leaves rubbing together. You saw me that night. Now you must see more. I wanted to run, but my legs felt nailed to the ground. She lifted her calabash slowly and opened it. A sound poured out, not a scream, not a song, but something between both. And inside the calabash, I saw faces, faces of people I knew. They were whispering, mouths moving without sound. Then I heard it clearly. They were calling my name. Chike, Chike. I woke up gasping for breath, my body covered in sweat. It was still dark, and the night was silent except for the distant hoot of an owl. I sat up and looked around the hut. My mother was still asleep, my father snoring softly. The fire had burned down to embers. I touched the wall beside me, and my blood froze. There was no shadow. For a moment, I couldn't move. My hands trembled. Then I blinked hard, looked again, and it was there. The faint outline of my body appeared again as the fire flickered, but the fear had already taken root. From that night, I began to dread sleep. It was not only me. Soon, everyone in Umuokwe began to complain of the same dreams, Amauche's whispering voice calling their names. Some said she walked through the village at night, her bare feet making no sound. Some said they saw her reflection in their water pots, even when the pot was empty. Others swore they heard her humming that same sorrowful tune coming from the forest. Then one night an old woman named Mama Onwara ran out of her hut screaming. She said she saw Amauche sitting beside her bed, braiding her hair. The next morning, Mama Onwara was gone, vanished completely. No one found her body, only the mark of bare feet leading into the forest. The elders called for Dibia Nwokoye again. He came with his chalks, feathers, and cowries, looking older than before. When he threw the cowries, they clattered on the ground and rolled to a stop. He stared at them for a long time, his eyes wide with worry. He said, "Her body is gone, but her spirit remains. She feeds on the breath of those who remember her. The more you speak her name, the stronger she becomes." A heavy silence followed his words. Even the air felt heavier, as if listening. Finally, one of the elders asked, "What can we do?" The Dibia shook his head slowly. "She is bound to this land by pain. There was once injustice done to her. Until that wrong is known, the curse cannot end." No one understood what he meant, but his warning was clear. From that day, people stopped saying her name. When they spoke of her at all, they only said, "The woman in red." I tried to pretend everything was normal. I went back to helping my father on the farm, to playing with my friend Obi, to visiting the stream. But the peace never lasted, because every shadow began to feel like it was watching me. One afternoon, while I was gathering, when Obi died, everything changed. The laughter that had begun to return to Umuokwe vanished completely. The market became silent again. People no longer went to their farms in groups. They went quickly, alone, and came back before the sun began to fall. Every evening, the sound of mourning drifted from one corner of the village to another. Soft, tired wailing that had no strength left in it. We had buried too many people, and no one could say what killed them. But everyone knew who was behind it. Though no one dared speak her name aloud anymore, every heart whispered it. Amauche. 2 nights after Obi's burial, the elders summoned Dibia Nwokoye again. He arrived before sunrise, walking with his long staff carved with old symbols. His face looked worn and sad, as if he had aged 20 years in one night. When he entered the square, everyone stood back. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't even sit down. He just looked around at us and said, "You people of Umuokwe, you have allowed an ancient wound to bleed again." No one understood what he meant. He bent down, drew 3 lines on the ground with chalk, and placed a small piece of kola nut at the center. Then he whispered words under his breath that sounded like wind moving through dry leaves. The kola cracked loudly on its own. A few people gasped. He nodded slowly. "She has crossed beyond life. Her spirit was born from injustice. Until that wrong is faced, she will not rest. And you, all of you, will pay for it." One of the elders, Ogbuagu, stepped forward. "Dibia, we are dying. Tell us what we must do." Nwokoye's eyes glowed faintly as he stared at the chalk lines. He said, "To stop her, you must learn the truth of her pain. Her story was buried with lies. Bring her truth to light, and her shadow will lose its hunger." The words fell heavy on the ground. Another elder asked, "Where do we find this truth?" He looked up then, slowly, as if the answer pained him. "Go to the forest," he said. "Follow the old path that leads to the broken shrine. You will find what was taken from her there." The people murmured in fear. Everyone knew that place, Ulo Enso, the Forbidden Grove. No one had gone there in years. They said spirits lived there, restless and angry. Who will go? Someone asked. No one spoke, until my voice came out, small and shaky. I will go. Every head turned to me. My mother gasped, Chike! No, you are just a boy. But the Dibia looked at me and said quietly, He is the right one. The spirit has marked him already. She calls him by name in her dreams. The crowd turned to stare at me again. My chest felt tight, but something deep inside, something I couldn't explain, told me he was right. That night, I didn't sleep, because I knew that at dawn, I would enter the forest where Amauche's truth was waiting. The morning came with heavy clouds. The air smelled of rain and dust. I tied my small matchet to my waist and started down the narrow path that led beyond the farms, past the stream, and into the darker part of the forest where no birds sang. Every few steps, I heard whispers in the wind, faint, soft, and familiar. Chi, ki, chi, ki. It was her voice. The deeper I went, the colder it became. The trees grew thick and bent inward, forming a roof that blocked out the light. Soon I reached a clearing where the ground was covered with dry leaves. At the center stood the old shrine the Dibia had spoken of, a small clay mound, cracked and covered in moss. Half of it had fallen away. There was something buried at its base, half covered with dirt. I knelt down, brushed the earth away, and froze. It was a small wooden box, sealed with palm fronds and old twine. The air around it felt heavy, almost alive. When I touched it, the wind stopped completely. Then, faintly, a voice spoke behind me. Do not open it. I turned slowly, and there she was, Amauche. She looked exactly as she had before, tall, calm, her red wrapper untouched by dust. Her eyes were dark pools, deep enough to drown in. She stood a few feet away, holding her calabash in one hand. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. She smiled sadly. You came to find the truth. Now you will see what truth costs. Before I could move, she raised her calabash and poured it out. What came from it wasn't water. It was mist, thick and white, curling around me, carrying whispers that weren't words, but memories. The world around me blurred, my knees weakened, and when I blinked, everything had changed. I was no longer in the forest. I was standing in the same village, but it was younger, brighter, alive. The huts were new, the people smiling, the air filled with laughter. Then I saw her, Amauche, but younger, without the red wrapper. Her face was softer, her eyes bright. She was grinding pepper near her hut, humming quietly. A man approached, tall, broad-shouldered, carrying a farming hoe. He smiled at her and she laughed. Sound of it warmed the air. The rain did not stop for 7 days. It fell every night, heavy, endless, and mournful, as if the heavens themselves wept for what was buried beneath Umuokwe. The rivers swelled and carried away bridges made of bamboo. Goats bleated helplessly as water filled the lower compounds. Women said it was not rain, it was cleansing. And beneath it all, fear returned. Every time thunder rolled across the hills, I remembered her words. The man who betrayed me lives still. Find him and end his lie. Those words followed me everywhere, in my dreams, in the sound of the rain, even in my waking moments, when silence pressed against the world like a heavy cloth. But who could she mean? Our village was old. Many of the people from her time were gone. The few elders who remained were bent, gray, and tired. Still, each time I passed an old face, something inside me whispered, "Look closer." The Dibia, Umuokwe, called for me 3 days after the rain stopped. When I entered his hut, the air was thick with smoke. The smell of burnt herbs filled my nose. He sat cross-legged before a clay pot that glowed faintly from within. "She has spoken to you," he said without looking up. "But the truth you saw was not complete." I knelt before him. "She said a man betrayed her." He nodded slowly. "Yes, and that man's lie chained her to this earth." He reached into the glowing pot and drew out something wrapped in black cloth. When he unrolled it, I saw a small bone charm, cracked and dark. This was once part of her, he said. Her protection. Her power. When the villagers turned against her, someone took it and broke it. That act bound her spirit to the shadow of this land. He looked up, his eyes heavy. Whoever did that still lives, and his guilt feeds her sorrow. How do I find him? I asked. The Dibya's voice was low. The spirit will show you when the time is right. But be careful, Chike. Truth does not come without pain. When you uncover it, you may wish you never knew. That night, the dreams returned. I was standing in the middle of the square. The moon was full and silver, bathing everything in cold light. The huts were quiet, and the air was thick with mist. Then slowly, figures began to appear, old faces, blurred and shadowed, their eyes hollow. They whispered together, forming a low chant, and from their midst stepped Amauche. Her eyes locked on mine. "You have seen my pain," she said softly. "Now you must see his." She turned her face toward the biggest hut in the dream, one I knew very well. It was Elder Ogbuagu's. Before I could speak, she lifted her calabash and poured it out again. The mist rose like a wave, swallowing everything, and I woke with my heart pounding. In the morning, I went straight to my mother. "Mama," I said, "how long has Elder Ogbuagu lived in Umuokwe?" She looked up from peeling cassava. "Since before I was born, my son. He is the oldest man alive here." "Why?" I hesitated. "Did he know Amauche from long ago?" My mother froze for a moment, then gave a small sigh. "Ah, Chike," that name again. "Do not speak it." "Mama, please," I insisted. "Tell me what you know." She looked around carefully before lowering her voice. "Your grandfather told me once that long ago, before I was born, Ogbuagu was a young man who wanted to marry a woman the elders did not approve of. They said she was strange, her blood not pure, but he refused to listen. They say he went to her secretly until something terrible happened. No one talks about it now." Her eyes darkened. "Chike, my son, let the past stay buried." But how could I? Amauche's shadow was no longer just a whisper in dreams. It had already taken lives. And now I knew who the spirit meant. That evening, I went to see Elder Ogbuagu. His hut stood at the far end of the village, near the old iroko tree. The smell of herbs and palm wine filled the air around it. He was sitting outside, chewing cola, when he saw me. "Ah, Chika," he said, smiling faintly. "You look troubled." I bowed respectfully. "Good evening, Elder." "May the gods bless your strength." He nodded. "Sit, my son. Speak." I sat, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "Elder," I said quietly, "what do you remember about a woman named Amauche?" The cola almost slipped from his hand. For a moment he didn't breathe. Then he laughed, too quickly, too loudly. "Who told you that name?" he asked sharply. "No one," I said. "I saw her." In a dream, his eyes darted toward the forest, then back to me. "That is not a name to speak, boy. She was nothing, a ghost of the past." "But you knew her," I said firmly. "Didn't you?" His lips tightened. His voice dropped. "Go home, Chike. Go home before darkness follows you." He stood up and went inside without another word. That night I couldn't sleep. Outside the wind howled through the trees, and I thought I heard it again, that faint humming, soft and sorrowful. It has been 15 years since the woman in red vanished into the wind. The elders who saw those days are mostly gone now. New children have been born, children who do not know the name Amauche, or the fear that once clung to the air of Umuokwe like smoke. Our village has changed. The roads are wider, the roofs newer. We have electricity now, a small light that hums and flickers at night. People say Umuokwe is peaceful again, but sometimes, when I walk alone near the forest, I feel it, the stillness, the same quiet I felt that first day she came to the market. It sits beneath the sound of the wind, quiet but waiting. And I wonder if peace is only a dream the living tell themselves to sleep at night. I am a grown man now. I have children of my own, 2 boys and a girl. My wife Inkim laughs when I tell them old stories. She says, "You and your tales, Chike. These children will never sleep if you keep frightening them." But I cannot help it. The story of Amauche is a part of me, carved into my bones like the marks of the ancestors. It changed everything I know about fear, guilt, and truth. I tell it not to scare them, but so they remember. Because stories, in our land, are warnings that keep us alive. Still, I never told them everything. Not the dreams, not the way she said my name, not the nights when I still see her shadow move beneath the moonlight. It was during the dry season when it began again. The air was dusty and hot. The sun burned the leaves, and the earth cracked underfoot. I was walking back from the farm with my eldest son, Obinna, when he stopped suddenly. "Papa," he said, pointing toward the forest, "do you see her?" I followed his finger. There, near the edge of the trees, stood a woman, tall, still, dressed in red. For a moment, the world went silent. No wind, no birds, not even the sound of our footsteps. Then she turned, slowly. It was not Amauche. At least, not her face. This woman was younger, maybe in her early 20s. Her eyes were soft, not hollow. But her red wrapper, the cowries around her neck, the way she stood, it was all the same. "Come," I said quickly, my heart thudding. "Let's go home." Obinna frowned. "Papa, why?" She didn't do anything I didn't answer, because deep down I already knew what her presence meant. That night I couldn't eat. My wife noticed. "You're quiet," she said. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, then told her. About the woman, about the red wrapper, about what it could mean. She laughed softly. "Maybe it's just a traitor, my husband. Don't let old stories trouble your heart." But when I went to bed, sleep refused to come. At midnight, a sound woke me, soft humming, drifting through the window. A lullaby, the same lullaby Amauche once sang. I rose quietly and stepped outside. The night was warm, the moon full. Across the clearing, near the stream, I saw her, the woman from earlier, sitting by the water, humming to herself. Her reflection shimmered on the surface, and just like before, it didn't move with her. The next morning I went to the market and asked about her. Her name was Ngozi, they said. She had come from a far village called Nobi, looking for a place to trade palm oil and herbs. She had lost her parents young, and no one really knew her story. I stared at her from afar as she arranged her goods on a small mat. Everything about her felt familiar, the calmness, the gentleness, the quiet way she looked at people without fear or hurry. When she saw me, she smiled faintly. "Good morning, sir." Her voice made my chest tighten. It was the same soft, steady tone I had heard in my youth. I nodded slowly. "Morning, my daughter." "You are welcome to Umuokwe." She thanked me, then looked at me strangely. "Have we met before?" I forced a smile. "Perhaps in another life." She laughed, and for a moment the sound was pure. But behind it I heard something else, a whisper only I seemed to notice. "You kept your promise, Chike." For the next few days I watched her quietly. At first everything was normal. She sold her goods, greeted people politely, even helped the children fetch water. But then the strange things began again. The dogs barked at night, the stream turned darker, and 2 villagers, a man and a woman, were found dead near the edge of the forest. No wounds, no sign of struggle, and their bodies had no shadows. The fear returned like an old sickness. People began whispering again. "The woman in red," they said. "She has come back." But I knew, deep down, this wasn't vengeance. It was something else, something unfinished. I went to see Ngozi again. When I reached her hut, she was sitting outside, staring into the distance. "You shouldn't be here, old man," she said softly, without looking up. How did you know I'd come? I asked. She smiled faintly. Because you've seen me before. Her words sent a shiver through me. Who are you? I asked. She looked at me then, and in her eyes I saw it, the same deep, endless sadness.